we will have Jeff from marketing perspective join us in 10 minutes or maybe less than 10 minutes as such. Till that time, we can go over with couple of other things. And once again, all the questions and everything else comes nicely channeled in from Lanea. Trying to add to other things also means I think both myself and Terry, we're talking about design research a lot. So as a studio, we do design research, means we do not do typically syndicated design research. We try to make sure we understand every client is different. Every I would say project is different. Every timing is different. But apart from that, we still go and scout the world for inspirational and motivational elements. Typically, the trade shows for the next 2 or 3 months are cancelled. We know that, but it's going to they are going to start when we have this pandemic under control, and we will have that under control. When I say we, means the best people are working on it. But if you still are interested in what happened for the CES 2020, some of our designers were there, including Lania and David Byron, who also will be joining us tomorrow. So if you want, we can just send us an email or send a text, or let's say drop that in the chat box to Lanea. At the end of the session, we can send you a copy or a link to the entire copy. It is not just about one unit or one category or one, I would say, domain. It's what happens at CES. It's a grand circus. It's a circus like no other circus. You you log lots of miles. I think the entire month of miles happens in a couple of days or a few days as such. So that one is still there. If you need something else, just drop an email or text back to Lanea, and we can try to see how we can help you in those elements as such. So we keep on doing these things, and most of often we try to give this to our repertoire of our clients or current clients for the last few years. But right now we can just drop us email, and we can share that pretty easily as such. So that was that. Anything else we can try to move to? If not, I can see Mr. Jeff has already joined us, and we can literally segue into that particular world. Jeff, I think you can unmute yourself, and we can start to go from over there. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us. And I love the architectural background behind you as such. Uh, Before we go into any details in the marketing world as such, most of our audience have read about your bio and maybe have clicked on your link too. But before we start, do you want to just share something about you, something yourself? Who is Jeff as a personal person, and what do you do for fun, and what are your inspirational and motivational touch points?
Great question. Besides business these days, obviously everybody's kind of hunkered down because of the situation that we have. But as a rule, when things aren't as crazy as they have been, I'm an avid reader. I'm a history buff. I like to jog. I like to spend time outside, and doing more of that now than we have in the past. I live in the Detroit area with my wife Renee and son Jared, and just enjoying our time together here at GVAC. Thanks again for inviting me, and Lanea for orchestrating all of this. I know there's a lot of collaboration goes on trying to get 60, 70 people together on a virtual conference like this. And
No, way more than that.
What's that?
It's way more than that.
Yeah, how many you got on board here? It's quite a few people. Either way, whether it's 50 or 500, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of orchestration. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I feel very thankful to be part of it.
Sure. I know. I think we still try to set the stage again at the start of our, let's say, virtual design conversation, and the entire element is we are an industrial design studio. That's what our forte is, and then we have strategic partners as such. It might be in the brand, it might be in the world of marketing, it might be in the world of software technology development as such, and we try to make sure that we leverage them when we need. So even though we are biased as an industrial design studio, we still know that is not just design, but there's so many other factors that finally make your product, your business solution successful. And one of the primary one of them is marketing. And marketing is such a Jeff, it's such a complex world. Even sometimes I get confused about what is marketing. So that's why we reached out to Jeff, who has been in the marketing world and understands the element of how it means to business. I mean, just visibility is good, but then how does that visibility comes back to monetization? So today we will try to hear more from you, Jeff. And how should we do it? Should we just start with Q&A, or you have a few slides that we want to go through? How should we do that?
Well, you asked about marketing, and I think how we define that I think is important. So I think if you've read my bio, I have a lot of marketing background, but I've also run sales teams, operations, manufacturing, engineering, customer service. So I've got a little different perspective than someone that's always been in marketing. So my marketing definition may be different than other people because I feel like I can see something that's a little bit more all-encompassing. So many times, if you want to go to the first slide that I sent over to you, Jivek.
Yeah, I'm just trying to go over there. Sorry for that.
So often there's kind of I don't want to say a cynical approach, but a more focused approach on what marketing really stands for with most companies. And so I always like to start off with this slide. A lot of people see marketing as just taking full advantage of a customer, selling at a premium price. I pulled this one off if you have MeTV on your cable. You know that this is Mr. Haney, the quintessential marketing salesperson, selling Mr. Douglas Telly paper. And I thought, out of all the things we could talk about, this is probably the most salient given the current situation. But a lot of people view marketing as this particular piece where you're profit maximization, looking for ways to kind of take advantage of customers and getting that premium price if possible. And obviously, this is a part of it. You want to be able to get a fair price out there in the marketplace and be able to meet the needs of people. But I take a little less cynical approach, and I really look at what marketing defines and the role that marketing plays, and I try to break it down into a real simple formula, and I call it the 3 C's and I. So the 3 C's would be to start off with the customer. Do you really know who your customer is? And so when you do that as a backdrop, everyone has a PowerPoint presentation that shows the age, where we sell, by state, by region, if you're a global company. This is where we sell. We have basic demographics. But do you really talk to your customers? And in my experience, sitting down with customers, whether it's one-on-one or a group, is so tremendous. And I think that people overlook it today because of technology that's available. And you can do a Survey Monkey and get results back by Tuesday. And it's good information. That's good quantitative. But there's nothing to be said for standing in front of a customer that's using your product, or doing a one-on-one, or even doing a focus group with people that are your customers. I have in my past on several occasions, I like to do kind of informal focus groups with customers, but I don't usually pick the people that like the company. I usually go after the people that we've lost. So I always go out to hate me workshop. So what I try to do is I get people that really hate the company. And I'll call people and say, will you come see us? They say, I can't stand you guys. I don't want to talk to you, quite frankly. And I said, you're exactly what I want. And they're almost flabbergasted by that comment. Because I figure that if you can make your worst customer, if you want to keep that customer, your worst customer happy, that you raise the bar for the whole company. So that's where I always start. A VOC, getting to know the customers, understanding who they really are, and getting past the PowerPoints, I think is very, very, very important. I think the second C part of that is who's your competition? And I always feel that people underestimate their competition. Your competitors are smart. They're in business for a reason, and they want to be aggressive, and they want to grow their business just like you. And most companies do a SWOT analysis or attempt to do that. You understand more about their company, but very few companies really do a SWOT analysis on their competitors and really understand where their strengths and weaknesses are, so they can see the future and how they would affect them moving forward and how they can progress. So I think that's the second part of the C. The third part of the C to me is capabilities. Can you execute as a company? So a lot of people have the rigors of going through an annual process where you go through your objectives and you do a lot of really good things, making sure that you make the top line, the bottom line, some baseline things like maybe you're installing an ERP or you got cost takeout. There's some key variables in there that you have to deliver on in the very short term to stay in business. But what I'm talking about is really more of a capabilities way to go in and identify leadership traits that you're looking for your whole organization, and then explaining that and communicating that with everyone internally. So this could be listening skills, this could be processing data, this could be dealing with ambiguity. You need to pick those particular highlights that you think will help your company, and then you need to execute against that to understand what your capabilities are. So if you have a high growth capability factor, for example, and you really want to grow your business, but if you have a culture that doesn't like ambiguity, or can't talk to customers, or can't listen, you've got a big capability gap there that's going to prevent you from executing on your strategy. The same if you're an engineering company and you have process problems, or you have people that don't make decisions, and you can put that into your capabilities, you're going to have another set of problems as you start to grow your business. So to me, the 3 C's are the customer, what you have as far as your capabilities internally, and what the customers are doing. And then the I to me is the industry. So what's going on with your industry? Are your industry that's just naturally going to grow on its own? And if you're growing at 10% and the industry's growing at 20, you're not doing your job. And the reverse could be true too. Or if you're growing 10 and the industry's flat, you're doing a better job. Understand what's going on in your industry. So to me, when you step away from all this and you look at the 3 C's and I's, the marketing rule to me, when it's allowed to function correctly, takes these 4 factors, it puts them all together and helps the organization put together a 1, 3, and 5 year plan based on the customer's needs, based on what your capabilities are, based on where you think your customer is going, and where the industry is going to perform in the future. So in essence, what really happens is taking this good information and to the best of your abilities, really providing a future for the company, future for growth. And that to me is the true definition of what marketing should be doing.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That just really, that just makes sense. And I already have a few questions, but I'm going to let's say hold them to go further. Or do you want to have the questions in between, or should we go with a couple of your slides?
This topic, let's take them on. That's fine. I think it's
Yeah, so I just have a question about, let's say, the industry, right? I mean, some of the bigger public industries, it might be you might get the data from this world of internet to understand where the industry is going. What might be happening for industries or let's say companies that would be in your competition world, but you do not have any public data? They are privately owned, and you just cannot take anything for granted. How do you understand for those companies which might be privately owned?
Sure. I think there's 2 separate issues here. When we talk about industry, there's your specific industry that you're in, and then there's just the business world in general. So let's start with the business world in general. You can get the Kingsley Report, which is very inexpensive, all the way up to subscribing to ITR and some other people. And that just helps you understand what's happening in the business world. What's going on with, oil? What's going on in China? What's going on in the Middle East? These are just good insights for good business people to have. In those cases where you're in a smaller industry, where you don't have a rigorous way to get your own industry data, and I think that's where you were headed, correct, Vivek? Is that sometimes you have to create that on your own. Okay, sometimes you have to build that out. So sometimes you have to build independent surveys that you send out on SurveyMonkey, or engaging your sales team when they're out talking to customer to give them a list of questions to ask. And these are all very low cost ways to start building metrics around the industry sizing and starting to triangulate some of the numbers. And I've worked for bigger companies and smaller companies, and your point's a good one. The smaller companies have less data that's readily available. But what's interesting, as a smaller company, when you build the data out and you're the only one that can have it. So you can buy all these lists, and if you're in a competition with somebody in a Fortune 1000 company, anybody can buy those lists. So everybody has access to that. But think about it this way. A smaller company that doesn't have access to an industry list can build it on their own, and then they have a huge competitive advantage because no one can buy it and they own it. I think that's very intriguing. That was one of the things I learned in my experiences working with smaller companies as well. And that gives you a huge differentiator in the marketplace because you're able to see and get insights that no one else can go out and get if you do it correctly.
That's pretty interesting to see, and how you can, if life throws you a lemon, how to make a lemonade. If nobody else is having that, if you do that, you just own it, and you will have some amazing kind of a leverage to be using from that perspective. By the way, not just for you, but for the audience, I know the scribbles might not be completely visible unless you zoom in, but at the end of the day, I will try to take a photograph and we can just try to send you. It's predominantly to understand right now the flow and then try to see how I can cross connect some of these as we start to develop the discussion towards the end of the day. I have just one more element, Jeff, on the elements that you mentioned.
Sure.
The competition. The second one is really important, and this is not a loaded question, but I know you have been in the product design world a lot. Sometimes we know the competition, but just like any designers know that there are plenty of other people who might not be out in the market, but they might be working on the similar problems. Because if you are a true designer, as a internal external design studio, or an internal design studio, if people are genuinely trained and experienced to look and identifying those kind of frictions and the problems and the pains and the aggravation that people have, chances are there might be 2, 3, 20 dozen teams working on it already. So when the graph or the curve hits the market, at that time you might be completely, let's say, caught by the blind side by somebody that we would not have in our competition metrics. So is there any way from the marketing world to, I don't know even how to ask it, anticipate what this newer competition might be, even though we have not seen it?
Oh, you mean as far as a new entrant with a new product and
Yeah,
something the next Starbucks for coffee or whatever, that kind of thing that you're looking at?
yeah,
I think a lot of that has to do with going back and really listening to your customers better, and getting past some of the survey things, and watching customers, or watching competitors. Most people go to events. There's always a show, right? There's tons of shows out there, and people go to it. In my experience, I'll go in there with my badge on and I'll introduce myself and, hey, I'm Jeff Jolly. I'm your competition, and I'll sit there and I'll talk to the competitor. It's amazing what people will tell you, and they'll open up with you and talk to you about what they're doing, what they're working on. You'd be surprised what they will want to brag about, and it gives you some more insights. Also, buy competitive product, or understanding more about the competition. It's amazing what happens when you call somebody's 800 number and just ask them for some basic information. It's amazing what you're able to glean off of them and what they're working on as well, because they want to tell you about it too. So there are ways to get at the competition. It's a pretty open and free system that we work in. It's on the web, it's out there, and then as you start to put some of these things together, I think that's where you really start to talk about and taking some of those raw nuggets and going back and seeing if you can validate some of that with the customers.
that's beautiful, Jeff. You can do that. You have that experience and confidence, and that's why I'm trying to add one more C. You need confidence to just go there and stand there and say, "My name is Jeff Jolly. I'm your competition. Let me buy you a cup of tea and let's discuss what's happening in the market." That's pretty bold, but that's, I think, what's needed too. And you're right. What's the investment there? Nothing. It's just a couple of minutes and a coffee. And what will happen? The person will just say no, but some person will say yes. And that's what you're saying. You appeal to them in an honest way, identify who you are, and not
Yeah, yeah,
hide
no,
behind
no
anything
problem.
else. That's beautiful. I like that. I'm just
And
adding to your
like
thing
I said,
about that
I've
the six
never,
C.
I've never had an issue uh, getting people to open up. Customers want to talk to you and your business. They really do, because no one's talking to them today. Okay,
Yes.
people are talking to them even less than they ever had been because of technology. So when you reach out to people, they really respond very, very well, and your competition is the same way. So to your point, don't be bashful, because you may be surprised on what they will tell you.
I like that. So people add one more C to it, confidence. And maybe as we are talking about the competition and the strategy out there, it reminds me of the work of John Nash. John Nash was one of our nation's Nobel laureate. He actually got an Nobel Award in 1994 for the theory of gamification. And I'm going to paraphrase it a lot, but what he eventually said was about strategy. I think it would be applicable to the marketing strategy also, is, let's say, and talking about competition and having this conversation, the what he would say is, I'm still paraphrasing, is, if you know each and every iota of all the competitive strategy that your competition is doing, and having understood that, you come back and still do not change a single part of your strategy, then that's your confidence that you bring to the game of making sure that you do your research. If you are doing something just because competition is doing, that also is not right. But what we are trying to blend, what Jeff is saying and what John Nash said, is about making sure you scan the surface, you scan the landscape, make sure you understand what your customers need, and then also understand what the other people are trying to fill in those needs, maybe completely, maybe not. And then eventually it's your leadership, I would say, as you're saying, your capability, leadership discussion, which will help you understand what role to go to the next. That's wonderful, and thank you for allowing me to ask questions in between. uh, I think the next one that we always talked about is about the changing role of marketing. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Jeff?
Sure, absolutely. If you could flip to the next chart here very, very quickly, if you could. I think there are many things that are changing out there. This is a chart, and there's a lot of information on here, but I wanted to draw everyone's attention circle at the bottom right. What is happening out there today for two reasons? People are more and more aware of the product that they're looking at. They are very much more educated than they ever have been. Technology has enabled this tremendous pre-buy opportunity for people that go out to the marketplace and buy anything today. So what used to be something that was more of a sales issue, where people would go into a store or wherever to buy the product or the service, and in that last 3 feet, as I like to say, there was a lot of discussion points and being sold, and I put sold in quotes, because the customer didn't know a lot about products and services. And quite frankly, the people they were talking to in the storefront or wherever were very, very knowledgeable. A lot of people had been very well trained and had been in that position for a number of years. Now you fast forward to where we are, and you look at what's on the web, and you look at the reviews you can get on Amazon. I mean, what a great place to go and find out how a product really works, by finding, talking to 1,000 people that have already bought the product. And you lay on top of that the fact that people aren't being trained anymore in sales. They just aren't. The people are moving more to different areas of business, and you're not getting someone that has been well trained in an industry for 20 years anymore. In some cases, you're actually dealing with a part-timer that's only been there for 6 months. And what you're traditionally finding is a lot of times the consumer or customer has much more awareness and understanding of what they're trying to buy than the people that are standing in front of them trying to sell in that last 3 feet. So I think this is a very, very relevant thing for the changing role of marketing, in that most people, when they go to pull the trigger, as they say, to go buy something, 3/4 of them have already made up their mind on what they're going to buy, or it's down between one and two things. So just going out and hiring a bunch more salespeople, it's not going to help anymore. You can't leverage that the way you used to. It used to be, if you want more sales, hire more salespeople. That's not the case anymore. It's a very well-enabled group of people out there that are shopping. They're very sophisticated, and they know a lot about the products before they even go to make that purchase. And the more dollars involved, the more research that they've done. And I just think that's something everybody really needs to be aware of. And I think that's a key role on the marketing change. On top of this, so you look at this, and we're going to talk about the web here in a second, but it used to be that sales was so close to the marketing that they were, a lot of times they were the same person, sales and marketing. And you still see a lot of that today. What you're seeing more and more of now is you're seeing the sales role being integrated with the IT person, because that's where the sale is actually taking place. It's not between marketing and a person per se that's on the marketplace, even though it's very relevant and you need a good sales force. It's even more important today that marketing is partnering with the IT side of the business, because they're the ones that have to execute programs out on the web that do all this kind of pre-selling. So when they do get to the storefront, they're already pre-sold on your product. And I think this is a major change that has happened in all industries in the last 10 to 15 years. It's been enabled by technology and the fact that people are staying at jobs less, and there's less training available for most people.
That's 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 nice to see the way the spectrum is changing for marketing and sales. That's nice to just see it as a visual as such. Can you help understand, at least for me too, means we always hear about, it all depends, I think, on which industry or which size of company you are in, but we always hear marketing, sales, business development, uh, PR, visibility. Is there any differentiation, or as you are saying, it is going to be part of a single kind of an container for all these elements? uh, so the question would be, even though we are sensing the change of role of marketing and expanding its, let's say, its influence, I still would there be another case to consider where you see not just this expansion or this reduction, but the overlapping of both of them? Is now marketing overlapping with a couple of other things rather than just changing their amount of, I would say, area of influencing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I started out years ago in marketing, marketing was events, point of purchase, advertising. It was very focused on building awareness and building brand. And based on all the changes that have happened, and you mentioned a few of them, where you've got development, and you've got all these different areas kind of surfacing. Marketing has, in many cases, become kind of the function that everyone gravitates toward as they define their business, because it's really the most neutral of the functions, so to speak, that can take all the things that we talked about, the three C's, maybe it's the four C's. I like that, GVAC. I'm going to take that, and the I, and taking that and being able to put that all together. Because unless you look at it all at one time, you really can't come up with a firm strategy. You can't leave anything out. And I think what marketing has been able to do in most companies is it becomes kind of the repository for all this information flow in, and then they become the driver to help put this in a package that everyone can understand, and then help drive the 1, 3, and 5 year plan. So I think the role of marketing, not because I've sat in the chair for so many years, is becoming more important. I think but it really has been, because as all these things have evolved, you're going to need a point function in there to take all this great information and make heads or tails of it, and then make sure that you can drive that out and make sure that your company's successful in the future.
That's beautiful. I like your passion and the elements you're making it to establish the case. So I'm just intrigued, and this is a loaded question, Jeff. A
Okay,
really loaded question. So, since looking at the influence of marketing, and it is growing leaps and bounds day by day, especially as you said, making the pivot to the circular economy or the IoT of things, should marketing then, in the hierarchy of a big company, should design, industrial design, or usability design, hierarchy of a company should report to marketing or should report to engineering?
I've had both organizations report in different places. I've had engineering report up through marketing, and it works well. I've had it not, and it works just as well. I think what happens is you have to make sure that the company's on board with making sure that everyone's using the data and is in alignment. The focus on who reports to who shouldn't have as much of a responsibility or as much of an impact as it does in some cases. But if you're sharing information and you are making sure that everyone is tracking along with all this information that you're getting from the field and the customer and the competitors, everyone should pretty clearly see what needs to happen. I think that things do move differently when engineering does report to marketing. I'll put it out there. I do think it takes on more of a flavor for the customer, but that could be at the detriment of quality or working with the manufacturing group to take costs out. So there's always this kind of this give and take as you go through this, and I don't think it's a one size that fits all. But I think if all the executive leaders are talking and they are on board and aligned, I think it can work no matter how it's structured.
Yeah, I completely understand that perspective. As I said, it was a loaded question,
Okay.
and my answer to it would be, it should report to none. It should report directly to the CEO. The design finally needs to have its own existence, and I think there are a few handful companies who have their CDOs, their chief design officers
Yeah,
as such,
absolutely.
just like a CMO or a CFO. But I think Means, as we all know, I am a designer and we are a design studio and we're bias of design. But seriously, when we talk about human centricity, with customer centric design, it makes sense that design can and should be a part of its own element rather than always being reported through some other mediums as such. But I also know some companies just cannot change the organization structure, and that's the way they have been aligned. And that's pretty good. Uh, you did not mention that, but when we talk about smaller companies and we are understanding marketing and the changing role, how would a startup company, to the start of the entire day, we talked about 85% of startups slash small companies just go out of business in the first 3 years. And not just the product design might be wrong. Some of them might not be utilizing marketing strategies as you are mentioning. Is there something else that a startup company should be thinking about marketing and how to understand that? Because at that time, even though it might be an entrepreneur or it might be an intrapreneur of a big company, the budgets are always less. I have still not met a company who comes and says, Sandberg Farrar, here is an unlimited budget and do something. What would be the elements for a startup company to think about marketing and its rightful investment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to put a marker out there. Marketing does not have to be expensive. Talking to customers is not expensive. Um, so many times people get kind of wrapped up and you can spend a lot on marketing. Don't get me wrong. And I've seen companies overspend in large amounts. But you understanding your customer, talking to your customer, knowing your competition, it is not something that is out of reach for anyone. And what I found is, and I've worked for smaller companies that got much larger quickly, once you kind of put those building blocks in place, and as you start to grow out, what you'll find is you may not be able to make all the calls personally, so you might farm that out. You may want to go to a survey for part of it, and you start to spend more money, but it's not because you're doing different things. It's because you're growing and you still want to get that same type of information, but you just can't make it work because you can't make it scale fast enough with the people that you have. So I don't think marketing has to cost a lot of money. As a matter of fact, my claim to fame in any place I've ever been, I've always held the budgets firm. I do not like to raise a marketing budget. I go out and I find the money if I can on a bigger company, and you cut events or you do things that don't add any value, and you move that money to something that does. Now, you obviously can't do that with a startup because there's no money to begin with, and I think that's your question. But just getting on the phone and talking to people and keeping your ear to the wall, you can do it with a pretty low cost way to start those building blocks to make sure that as you grow, your finger stays on that pulse, because that's where companies get in trouble. They lose their way. And they start doing too many PowerPoints, and they start getting too involved with all the studies that you can do at lowest smoothing, and there's countless ways to go out and look at your business. But at the end of the day, it's all about who's your customer. Make sure you stay very close to that customer. Know the competition. Know what you're capable of. All right. I can steal from you and have the confidence to go out there and talk to people.
I like that. There it is, folks. You don't need a budget to have a Super Bowl ad. Can always be creative with the way you can look at what needs to be solved. I think what Jeff also is mentioning here is the world of clarity. You have to have fierce clarity in the way you want to solve the elements for your ecosystem, and then making sure you leverage the right kind of the three C's plus industry plus one more C of confidence to do that. That's beautiful. I think should we go to the next slide, Jeff, for one more point?
This takes you into some of that cost opportunity that I talked about. If you want to click one more slide for me, this is the last slide I have. So this is a chart that you talk about your marketing investments and how do you make this pay off. Let me just start before you talk about the site. There's metrics that you can always put around marketing. What's your brand awareness? What's your conversion rate? These are not hard things to put in place. They may be a little softer than when you go out and buy a piece of machinery or you buy a new roof and say, this is what it does for me. But you can put metrics around how you invest in marketing to make sure that you're justifying your spend. Without it, it doesn't work. So what this chart basically says is I always start off with the web, because we talked a little bit about how people are in the pre-sale, the pre-buy, technology's enabling this. You have to have a website today, and it has to be very good. If people just put something out there and say, I'm now on the web, and here we go, you're mistaken. And I'm going to give you a site that you can go to. It's a freebie. It's called webgrader.com. Pump your site in and see what it comes up with. It will tell you.
Can you say it again?
It's called WebGrader, one word, W-E-B, grader.com. Go and type in your website, and it will give you a quick snapshot of what your site, how well your site performs. Now, I work for a company called Chief Outsiders, and there's 65 of us that go out and help companies grow. And this is one of about 50 tools that we have that we go in and do real down and dirty analysis of how good a company's performing out in the marketplace. You were talking about costs, Gina. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do this. This one you can get off the web for free, and there's a lot of these type of things out there. But this will help you determine how people are seeing you out in the marketplace. And there's some good sites out there, and there's some terrible sites out there. And I can tell you, I work with companies where I actually told them, you're doing more harm by having a website out there the way it looks than not having one at all. You're absolutely destroying yourself. And then we would fix that. And again, fixing a website is not $1 million. You can spend $1 million on it, but you can put together a pretty good website for well under $10,000. And that is your calling card because the whole world sees it. So when you look at what's going on out there in the pre-buy that's happening, and I threw a couple statistics out there, the people that are on Google searches every day, there's only 8 billion people on the face of the planet, and we got 5.6 billion searches happening every day. You know, a half a billion on LinkedIn, 2.5 billion on Facebook. This is something that you just have to be involved in because this is the world that we live in. Okay, it's so different than what it used to be. If you go down to the bottom where it says 80 people all do content management, they all understand it, and 70% of them are terrible at it. There's no other way to say it. They are terrible at content management. So they're out there, they're talking about their brand, and they're not getting through to people. And it's very confusing, and people move on. And there's a lot of statistics that will show this. There's really interesting things that you pick up on the web. For example, you know, when you go to on your new website, when you go to what is it? Add to my cart. You know, everyone see that, the add to my cart button. Do you know that if you make that light green, that's the most popular color? And if it goes from black to light green, that you get a 33% lift on add to my cart, just on the color. I can't make this stuff up. I mean, there's people that look at this every day. Those are the kind of nuances that are happening out in the web today. And that's a very specific one. Now, step back and look at what your web looks like today and some of the mishmash that people have out there. It's incredible that people allow it to happen. And there's statistics and there's good data out there that can help you build a really good website for pretty inexpensive. And I think this is a huge thing that people need to look at. So to justify marketing, I think this is a marketing IT function to really help it clean it up, to make sure that your SEO is good, so you're getting a lot of people in there, your performance is high, so once they get them in there, you're getting the information that you want to get very quickly because those are the two big spots on the web. But this is very critical to most businesses because this is how most people see you for the first time outside of a referral or seeing you outside of an ad. And this is where most people are getting their information. So you need as a company to really be focused on this. And this is, again, a low-cost, easy thing to fix that most people don't even put metrics around to understand that they even need to fix it, unfortunately. And it's too bad.
That's beautiful because that 5.6 billion itself is a big number, but especially right now to the context we are in, most of the workforce, at least as we know, is now holed up in our basements and our makeshift offices and kitchens. So that number, I think, for these couple of weeks would go extraordinarily high. We are actually doing some design research projects, and we understand the power of human connections and actually talking and working with focus groups on-site, off-site. But for the next few months, we just have to do it remotely, and that these things will go on increasing. So making that as a pretty big element would be always be, I would say, favored upon. But I have more questions coming in. We will get to that.
Sure.
But somehow, Jeff, I think, can you take a minute or two to explain this concept of chief outsiders? You have been too humble in not talking about who you represent. Can you take a moment, because that's a pretty interesting group of what you do. So, can you
Okay.
please explain the audience what do you mean by chief outsiders?
Okay. I'll try to avoid sounding like a commercial. Okay, because that's not what this is about. But yeah, absolutely. There are roughly 70 people like myself that are in the nation. We are out of San Antonio. I'm located here in Detroit. And what it's made up of is a group of people that are not career consultants. We've all been VPs of other companies. I've been involved with Whirlpool and Masco here in Detroit and Brunswick. And you have to have a pretty steep background in marketing and business to be part of this team. And so what Chief Outsiders does is, if you have a business problem, we will come in and we will help you solve your problem, whatever that may be. And it may not be me in Detroit because I'm not the most qualified person for whatever scenario it is. We call on people from all over because even though I came from manufacturing, I know people that are really solid in web, or they're solid in restaurants or hospitality. And out of 70 of us, we all have kind of a unique kind of combined background that can pretty much address any problem that's out there today. And we can engage for a workshop for a day, or we can engage for 6 months to help you turn around your company. It's really up to you. But that's what we do at Chief Outsiders. So and I've done many engagements, and it's a fun way to help people really start to grow. And all the things that we're talking about right now, the kind of basic blocking and tackling that we're having, we have all the tools behind that. Again, it's a pretty low cost way to do it. A lot of the stuff that we use is on the web or things that we've developed internally, quite frankly.
That's thank you for that. And there are many questions, and some of them you will love it, some of them you might not. Let's go with the softer ones. John
Okay.
has a question here. Has there been a case, like I think he's talking about the understanding the customer as such, and we go with design research on that element. Has there been a case where good focus group research has been done, that we know from the customer, the VOC, what we want, but then the product is a flop? So how do you maybe stop that? And then if that happens, how can marketing help that one too, if at all?
Well, and I've been part of flops. Anybody that hasn't doesn't have enough experience in the business because they don't all go the way you like them to. What I have found is that when you listen to customers, they have a certain, and you drill it down to the products, the features that they want, the pricing has to be close to that. The biggest issue that people will run into, I think, is they get cost creep because the customer wants it for X and it costs more than it does. And as it gets cost creep, people tend to take some of the features off to try to maintain their costs. So I think the flop factor, if there is such a thing, goes up exponentially with cost creep as you try to make sure that you can make it or source it for the right price and still make sure that all the features and benefits are there. So I think that's those are the biggest things that I saw with a flop. And again, one focus group does not a new product make. You got to do research, and focus groups are very good, and it's a great way to get some really qualitative kind of directional things. But you may need several focus groups and a couple qualitative surveys, and then a couple prototypes in front of customers if you got a big fixed kind of overhead that you have to try to cover on the front end to make sure that you go through that. I would never recommend doing a focus group and then coming out with a product unless you could do it for almost free, which never happens.
That perfectly makes sense. If I want to add something, not just to reply that question, but when we talk about design research, focus groups, intercepts, circle of friends, any tools you want to take with. So when we write our customized proposals for clients, one of the main earnest element for us to let them know is, and they always understand that when we do any research, it might be marketing or design or otherwise, we have to make sure that we save some space after that for refining or adjusting or editing that back into the design cycle, because we have to truly go open-minded to an focus group clinic or design research with the intention is like you can still test hypothesis. You need to do that, but you have to still make sure that you understand, not just listen what they are saying, not just the frequency of words, but understand the grammar of what they are saying, and then literally have the gumption to go and change and refine accordingly to that particular element. Or else, if you are just going there to be proud of saying, hey, these are the things that talk what we already talked, then that might not be the right way to look at design research also. So that would be the one aspect of design research. There are a couple of other questions over here too. Uh,
Yeah,
let me.
if I could just, one thing that you said is that when you're going through the innovation side on the product development side, listening is such a critical piece of it. I worked with a very well-known product design house in Commerce, Michigan. You may know who they are, GVAC. And they helped us, Sunberg helped us develop a controller for the performing arts side of the business. And one of the things that we found out in being clever and asking the right questions was the general population, I want to say, is about 8% left-handed. In performing arts, it's almost 20. So we developed this controller. We had to keep in mind that a larger percentage of people were left-handed, which has a lot to do with ergonomics. And this was just one of the clever things that as you listen and you start to do product design, and we listen to Terry and how it's evolved, but there's also this ergonomics that you can't overlook that made it a lot easier for people, for lefties, as they say, to use our product. And that was just because we listened, and it was very easy to design that into the product and make a big splash of it out in the marketplace. And we actually had people come up and says, no one ever thinks about me and I'm left-handed. Thank you very much. And those are kind of things, didn't cost us a penny. It just costs us an extra day of listening to the customer. I think it's very powerful.
That makes sense. There have been other questions too. There is a small one over here, and it's from Jarvis, specifically asking you, can you provide the citation for the add to the card button color anecdote? He likes it, so eventually when you have something, can you send the link to Lanea, and she can make sure she can pass on to Jarvis. So that's pretty good. For maybe he wants to help reframe that to his, I would say, his one of his clients or something like that too. Then we have other questions. I think marketing, I think, is understandable, and to paraphrase it pretty small as such. Isn't marketing difficult to justify? Typically, I think some of the product champions or product leaders, if they are investing into product design, and they should, but they should also be investing into product in marketing. How should they build the case of justifying it if their leadership is not, let's say, accepting it?
Sure, that's a great question, and I think again I go back to the original chart that we had where the kind of misperceptions about marketing. They get the big dinners and the events and all that kind of fun stuff, and that can be part of it. But to me, the justification comes in putting together metrics that say when we do this, this happens. So when you do an ad, you should make sure that you understand how many people read the ad, how many people converted the ad, and how many people actually bought because of it. And what it really does is it turns it into marketing being a cost to marketing being an investment with a payback. And too often when you don't have those metrics, that's what happens. So you have to make sure that there is a science to marketing, and there always has been. When you find a good marketing person, they will put those metrics around there, because what happens is as you're able to prove that out, then you can go back to the organization and say, we spent $1 million on this, or we spent 10 cents on this, and look what it achieved. If we spent double that, it would achieve double that. Can we make that investment? And that helps you grow the business. That goes a lot longer than saying we just need to do 10 more events next year, and every event is $6,000. That just doesn't fly. So you have to put some parameters and some metrics around everything you do in marketing, just like you do in sales and just like you do in manufacturing and operations. You would never in manufacturing go out and buy $1 million new manufacturing process unless you did a lot of analysis on this is what it's going to cost and this is how much it's going to save. The same thing has to apply to marketing. And that's what I think that is a changing world of marketing again, that says you have to do that. It's so important today to make sure that every dollar goes as long as it should.
That's beautiful. I have a couple of more elements, and then we will again go back to your bits of wisdom. By the way, when you talked about data and the alignment of data, I think Jeff knows, but for our audience, when you say data, it's not just the technical or the numerical data. Data has to be interpreted into information, information to knowledge, knowledge into wisdom, and there is a way of how you grab that. Not just looking at the numbers and making it speak what you want to speak. That would be, I would say, a different use of data, which people still do. Uh, but understanding how it can be helpful for what we want to do. There are many questions, but I think we should take this question, and I would try to at least go back to your first slide, because the question, I know this person, I will not read her name, but this might be something, I just want to make sure that you can explain your first slide again. You said taking full advantage of a customer by selling a product or service at a premium price. And the question here is, this is definitely not how we would design or teach marketing. So was your thing about taking advantage in a jest, or that's exactly what you mean? I would just want you to reply it if you meant otherwise.
I do that chart out as what marketing is not. Okay,
Yes, yes,
that's how I started this thing.
yeah,
That is what most people think about marketing is,
yes,
profit maximization. So that is where I absolutely did a pivot and said, no, it's about the three C's and I.
yeah,
That's what marketing's about, and that's what you need to drive, and that gives you a sustainable business model for a long time, as opposed to, someone that right now is going to charge, $20 a roll for toilet paper, and we've all heard about it, or selling chainsaws at a premium after there's been, a big windstorm or whatever. That is not what marketing does, and that was the cynical approach to it.
yeah. So I
Clear.
knew that, but maybe the mic would have been off, or just looking at the slide, it might have given her that kind of an inclination, because I think that's how you started. The stigma is not just nickel and diming. That's what we are faced with, and then how you solve it was how you gave your essay and your commentary. So I know her. If you want, I can connect you both of you together. But again, that was not the intention as such. So
No, no,
that's always nice to make sure that we are level
that was,
set, and
that's
you
a good
never
one.
know. And I think as we are all experimenting with this virtualness, means we have done virtual webinars and elements here and there, but this is what we as humanity would always lack when there is no face-to-face connect as such. So I think that's one part of just the way we are presenting this through this kind of an webinar as such. But talking about humanity, I think means we did not. I'm not an expert in pandemics or virology or something, but when you talk about human beings, we are innately social mammals. We are who we are. If you want to see, we are the pinnacle of the entire animal kingdom. We are there by just one element, and that's social connection. So eventually, when this COVID-19 pans down, again, life is going to come back to normal. We have done that against MERS, against SARS, against birds flu, swine flu, just the flu, cholera. Means we have lost plenty of lives. I'm not degrading that. Our heart goes to all of them and the families at that time or today too. But coming back to the world of socialness and face-to-face connections and meetings going to happen, it's just going to happen. I do not know why I started talking about that. It was because of the virtual connection as such. There was one more point before we can come back. Yeah, connecting between the earlier speaker, Terry, and you, what you were mentioning your last slide about the I would say the way it's going to project itself in this wide, big world of web, and how marketing is important. Terry's one of the main point was about the form factor, right? Apart from doing all the things right, make sure your form stands for the meaning you want to convey. And that is more true, again, coming back to your point, Jeff, is when you look at Amazon, maybe on your 15-inch screen, and you look at a small thumbnail of the product you want to buy or consider in your funnel as you go down, you just get a stamp-sized visual connection with what that person or entity is selling to. So sometimes in this minuscule of microseconds, as you're scrolling down this big valley of Amazon or other retailers too, the visual impact is going to matter. First you stop you and then have you click, and then you go on to more images and the renderings, and then it tells the story. visually, and then you again get your references from word of mouth, or you actually go and have somebody seen it in the barbecue party or somebody else. So all these things is going to be more and more important. Actually, now the form more than ever in this form of web enabled marketing is going to be too strong. So I know we are a little bit over the top of the hour, and I'm completely okay with that, because most of us are sitting in for the entire day and hopefully for the next day also. So trying to I would say not summarize, but coming back over to you, Jeff, and I'm going to ask that. I'm asking that for each and every I would say speaker. Apart from marketing, apart from what we talked about, we all know from your LinkedIn world that you have been there, done that. Seriously, means the amount of companies that you have worked with in what caliber is pretty amazing. You have achieved amazing things in your life. As such, many of our not many, some of our I would say audiences are earlier in their management profile, either design or marketing or brand, and some of them are students also. What would be some of your words of wisdom for them, and how they can be successful? What made you successful, and how you might want to give that kind of a nugget of wisdom to the next incoming batch of entrepreneurs?
Uh, sure. There, a couple of things come to mind. One, keep it simple. You don't have to make this uh, complicated. Don't worry about that. Go into it with your eyes wide open. And there was a very famous businessman that said, accept your business for what it is, not what it once was or what you want it to be. And I think that's a very important way to look at your overall business, and look at marketing as a place in this new world that we live in that can help really drive the organization by taking all the things that are out there and putting it into one area where everybody can look at it and make some really good decisions based on, again, customer, competitor, capabilities, with confidence, obviously, and that industry point. I think that just keep driving that home. Put metrics around it so you can measure it, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and you'll be surprised at what you're able to drive, and make sure that everybody's involved. I enjoy the business world. I think it's, if you keep it simple, keep everybody involved, be a good communicator, and really drive home the data that you can get that's out there that you don't have to buy. You got to do a little digging, but it's out there, and you'd be surprised what you're able to uncover out there and put it in a format that everybody can understand it. You'll really help drive the business. A lot of companies today are flying blind, and they're not using good data, and that's unfortunate. And if you bring them good data, I think that's going to be tremendous for people moving forward.
I like that. Thank you again, Jeff. Thank you a lot. There are other questions too. Maybe eventually we might want to make a master list of questions, and if you want to answer them something, we can be sharing that again back with the world. But thank you for your time. Feel
Thank
free
you.
to.
Thank you for the invite. It's been a good afternoon, and I hope somebody got something out of it. And good luck with the rest of your virtual conference. I think it's a good idea.
We need this, and that's the least we can do, right? And today the sun is out. It's pretty it's pretty sunny, it's pretty cheery, and this is what we need to do. We want to just make sure we are exchanging our point of view, our insights, our learning examples, and help people learn from them. So thank you again from being here and being a mentor. And you can still keep yourself logged in. Just mute your mic, and we will have a small breather, and then we will have the next speaker come in.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I gotta say bye now.
Awesome.